Hello and welcome to Getaway Day. My name is Gautam, his name is Mason, and today we're talking about the National League East division. It's a very exciting division.
Oh,
Full of
East. I
East.
thought you said Weast.
Weast. No Weast today,
Oh,
just
my bad.
East. If you enjoy the podcast, subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, or reaching out to us on Twitter and Facebook at Getaway Day Pod. Check out additional content on Instagram and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod. YouTube notification bell, hit that.
And the other YouTube channel.
And the other YouTube channel.
We have a really long little housekeeping intro thing that we got to really clean up. But yeah, so I got the other YouTube channel now, the Getaway Day Cards, and I recorded another mail day today that I'm going to edit as I edit this. And we hit another couple bangers, and I totally didn't even realize that one of them that I show off and was excited about, didn't even notice it was out of 50. So yeah, we got some good stuff coming. So make sure to follow that.
All right. So I think today we're just going to get right into the action, and that's the National League East. It's going to be one of the most highly contested divisions probably in baseball, with also the rebuilding Nationals and somewhere in the middle, Marlins. We're going to do lots of talk about the Mets, the Phillies, and the Braves, but let's mix it up and just start at the bottom of the division with the Nationals.
Before we get into the full or the individual teams, I just kind of want to add in, it's going to be one of the most contentious divisions, and I think one of the most anticipated divisions or like the most highly, what's the word? The most highly entertaining. People are looking forward to the NL East because last year this was hands down the best division in the league. The division with the most parity amongst its teams.
Hands down, though, right?
101 win Braves, 101 win Mets, 87 win Phillies. You look at the American League East, 99 win Yankees, still phenomenal, right there on par. 92 win 92 win Toronto, and 86 win Tampa. So it's like your first and your third place teams are the same. It's that second place team that really sets it apart. And like, there's no other team.
Top to bottom, though, you can't forget about the Orioles, who were really good.
That's true. And the Red Sox only had they only lost 84 games. Like for a fifth place team, that's pretty solid. But I think as far as I guess from a parity standpoint, you're right, the American League East. But the fact that we have three teams with a 537 win percentage last year or better, that used to be 87 wins pretty much guarantees you in the playoffs, or pretty close to it. 89 wins, you're in, basically. And last year that wasn't the case. 87 was the last playoff spot. I think did the Padres make it last year in the postseason? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess, they would have had to. It would have been a wild card.
They played the championship series.
But that's a good point. Against the Phillies. Okay. Makes sense. But yeah, in my opinion, this team is coming from being probably the best top-end team or division. This division is coming from being the best top-end division in the league in 2022. And it looks like, before we even talk about anything, the hype around it is that it's going to be that exact same thing again.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. I'm going to be watching so many NL East games, I think, this season, like Braves Mets, Phillies Mets, Phillies Braves. I mean, those are all just going to be fantastic matchups all season long.
Yeah. Nationals Marlins.
Marlins Nationals. Yeah. But let's start with the Nationals and talk about how, they tore things down last year. They traded Juan Soto. They traded Josh Bell. I mean, this team is nothing like how it was when they won the World Series just 4 years ago now. The only players that are still on the team are
Steven Strasburg
and Patrick Corbin, I believe. So this offseason, they've added some kind of stopgap major league type players like Corey Dickerson, Jamer Candelario, Dom Smith, maybe having a late 20s breakout season in store for us, Trevor Williams. So, like, these are all legitimate major league players. They're not difference makers, but it's going to, like, raise the floor of this club in general. They didn't really lose any players. And today we have some key questions for each of these NL East teams. And the question that we're going to ask about the Nationals is, do we see a championship core beginning to form in 2023 with this club over the course of the season?
Yeah, and so this is a Nationals team that, yes, they had the league worst 55-107 record last year.
Jeez.
Asking the question now, is there a championship core beginning to form, feels ridiculous.
Yeah.
It feels absolutely nuts, in that we should not be doing what we're doing because we know nothing. Except in the Juan Soto trade, who did they get back? They got Mackenzie Gore, they got CJ Abrams, they got some more prospects in Robert Hassel, James Wood, and I think one more, right?
Harlan Susana, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Abrams and Mackenzie Gore are going to be on the opening day roster for this team. They've got Luis Garcia, who was a rookie in 2020? 2021.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
2020, I believe.
I couldn't remember because the Phillies also have a Luis Garcia, who was a rookie right around the same time, and the Astros have a Luis Garcia, who was a rookie around the same time. So it's really confusing to remember which one was which. But then you go back a year before, and they got Keibert Ruiz, and they got Josiah Gray for
Max Scherzer and Trey Turner.
Yes, that's the trade. I knew it was a big trade.
Yeah.
And then recent draft pick from, I think, 2021, Cade Cavalli, is already right up there at the precipice of the majors. So, like, this is a team that has a lot of really good prospects that they've got through trades, they've got through drafting. And I mean, you take a team that was that bad last year, that they only won 55 games, you throw some really good prospects at it, you're probably going to luck yourself into some extra wins there.
Yeah, and just generally on those, so obviously they made that Scherzer Turner trade in 21. They made the Soto Bell trade in 22. They are sort of building this team like from the ground up. And we've seen this kind of thing work before. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but I feel like this Nationals team is kind of like going in the right direction. And some of these players that they've accumulated in these massive trades, franchise altering trades, are like, this team could be good in 2 years. Like, it wouldn't really shock me.
So I think the thing that is worth mentioning here is you see a lot of these big trades that you're like, wow, that was really lopsided. And wow, I can't believe that was all they got for that. And that was something that we were talking about at one point with Juan Soto. It was like, how are they only going to get XYZ? And then they went out and got 4 top 100 prospects and a guy who's probably going to be a top 100 prospect pretty soon. And some of those guys were right at the top. Mackenzie Gore was, I think, a number 2 prospect in baseball for a while. CJ Abrams was a top 20 prospect. Robert Hassel is a top 20 prospect, I believe. So, like, they didn't just go out and get a bunch of prospects. They went out and got the best prospects. They did the same thing when they traded with the Dodgers. They got their 2 best prospects and the best starting pitching prospect that they've had in a long time. And this is the Dodgers. If it's their best starting pitching prospect in a long time, he's probably pretty good. And then Keibert Ruiz, he was blocked at the major league level. Really, really good young catcher. Go get him. Like, they're doing it right. They're not taking a discount just to shed payroll. And I mean, there really wasn't many payroll concerns with Juan Soto at this point. So, like, it would be weird if they were. But Mike Rizzo is doing this completely right, from what it seems. Like, he's going after the big ticket guys that are still prospects. They're still lottery tickets, but they are probably the best shot that you've got for it to pay off.
Yeah, that's a great point about about the lottery tickets thing is, I mean, we know all prospects don't really pan out, but when you accumulate so many top tier, the best prospects, the probabilities just go way up that these guys are actually going to be major leaguers. That's pretty safe. I think they're not going to like bust out before they make to the majors. And then there's a much higher chance that they're actually going to become core players for this Nationals team in 2024 and beyond. Actually, I wanted to talk specifically about their pitching. So they've got in their starting rotation this year, they're going to have Josiah Gray, Cade Cavalli, and Mackenzie Gore, all guys that are under 25 that most likely are just going to be given the ball every 5 days and say, show us what you can do. We have these innings for you to eat and show us that, you're like an actual member of the rotation that's like on a good team, not
show
just
us you're ready
on a rebuilding team. Yeah. So any of these three guys you want to talk about specifically that you think can take the next step for the Nationals?
So I think the guy closest to taking that next step is Josiah Gray. Josiah Gray, he's 25 years old. He's the oldest of the three young guys. Cade Cavalli is 24 and a half. Mackenzie Gore is 24. Mackenzie Gore has had a bit of a weird last couple years where he ended up kind of losing his feel, went down to complex ball for a bit, found it again and came back. But Josiah Gray, I mean, he was an everyday starter for them last year. He pitched 28 games, 150 innings almost. His walk rate was pretty bloated at 10%. His strikeout rate, not amazing, but not terrible, I guess, at 23.7. His ERA, not particularly good at 5.02. 5.02. Not 502. He wasn't that bad. But Josiah Gray, let me find it. Where's it at? Oh, shoot. I completely forgot what I was looking for. I was trying to find his pitch speed. What's his? So his fastball averages about 94. He's got a great curve, a great slider, and his command is awesome. So, like, he should be able
to. The command being awesome part.
Well, what?
I'm going to have to disagree on the command being awesome part.
In the minors, his command was awesome. Better?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. So that gives me hope that, yeah, he can get back to not like being able to command all his pitches and not walking batters, the control aspect of it too. But in the majors, that's been the issue. He led the league in walks last year. He also led the league in home runs given up. But there's so much potential there. He still strikes out a ton of batters. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if a significant amount of that was just like feeling like the weight of the entire team was on his shoulders and his shoulders alone. Because you look at that rotation last year, Strasburg was hurt. Patrick Corbin, I think, was hurt for a significant portion of the year.
He wasn't hurt. He was just awful.
He wasn't hurt? Oh.
No, he was just truly bad.
But Josiah Gray was their best starter last year. And he was 24 in his first full season. Being the best starter on the worst team in the league, it comes with a lot of weight. And whenever you're still not comfortable at the major league level, that probably does weigh on you a lot. So at least coming in and having two other guys that are equally big prospects, I feel like that's going to shed a little bit of the burden of it all being on him. And so I wouldn't be surprised if just from a mentality standpoint, that helps him find a little bit more of his command, helps him find a little bit more confidence to go out there and actually perform at a high level.
Totally. I'm on board for him to be much better this year.
It reminds me a lot of what's going on with the Cincinnati Reds with Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo, to be honest with you. Like, those are two other guys who incredibly highly touted prospects, tons of upside. And last year they made their debuts, and Lodolo started out kind of rough, came back, and he ended up figuring it out a bit. Hunter Green started breaking out in the second half of the year, but like they were what was holding that team up. That team was awful. And so I see a lot of parallels here between the Reds rotation and the Nats rotation.
Okay, let's quickly just hit on one more guy here, and then I think we need to move on to the next team. But CJ Abrams, guy that they got in last year's trade, he was a major prospect for the Padres for years. The guy's barely played like any number of he's barely played games in his career. He's never played more than 90 games in a season, including the minor leagues. This guy has basically no experience. So when you look at like his numbers, and they're not like super impressive, 246, 280, 324 in 2022 in his 90 games, like you say, okay, this guy's what's going on? Like he's really not that great, all he's cracked up to be. But I think this guy just needs to play all the time, and I think we're going to start to see some of that talent if he plays 150 games this season.
Yeah, he's definitely a complicated one to just kind of look at if you don't watch him play. Because like really the best thing you got is looking at the prospect report for guys who do watch him play every day. And when you do that, they say he's got one of the best hit tools we've seen since Vladdy was in the minors. At least as far as prospect grades. He's got a 70 hit tool. Like the dude can hit everything. He's an 80 grade speed. He's got a significant amount of game power, but he's only 21. He's not even grown it, or 22. He's not even grown into his body yet. So you're probably not going to see all of his power coming out yet. His fielding is above average there. And so every scout says this is a stud. He's probably going to be one of the best players in the league. But yeah, he's only got 90 games in the majors, and he's only got, what is this, 60, 104, 106. He's only got 114 games in the minors, period.
Yeah.
He's almost got more experience in the major leagues than in the minors, and he didn't do awful. I mean, he didn't walk at all. Only 1.7% clip last year in 300 ABs. But he only struck out 16%. So, like, there's some positives there. We just need to see that on a longer term basis, and he's probably going to be just fine.
Yep. So that's Nationals. They've got plenty of players just like Abrams and Josiah Gray that will be sort of interesting to watch. Overall, the team's probably not going to be good. Zip's projection has them at 64 wins. That seems very reasonable to me.
So technically, we never answered the question. Do you see a championship core beginning to form? Yes or no?
I do see the makings of a championship core here with guys like Abrams if he comes through, the 3 starting pitchers that are young, and guys like Keeper Ruiz. I mean, I think those guys can be championship level players.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think 3-4 years down the road, we're going to look back and say, how in the world was this only a 60-something win team? So.
Yep. Okay, so moving up in the division, we got the Marlins. We talk about the Marlins, I feel like, every week here because we're trying to make sense of the moves they make during this offseason. So they brought in Luis Arias, Gene Segura, Johnny Cueto, AJ Puck, and they've lost Pablo Lopez and Brian Anderson. So returning a lot of their players. They did bring in some interesting players. Basically, with this team, we want to answer the question, are the Marlins a playoff contender? We're going to talk about the 3 clear top teams in this division, but where do the Marlins fit in this picture?
So I do need to ask you, this seems like kind of a weird question. Where did it come from? Why are we talking about the playoffs with the Marlins?
Yeah. So Bruce Sherman, the principal owner of the Marlins, said, we have a Cy Young Award winner in the dugout. We have a batting champion nobody wants to face our pitching staff. We can compete with anybody. My expectation is to be in the playoffs. So Bruce, what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah. So first of all, he does make some valid points. You do have a Cy Young award winner in your bullpen, and one of the top, I don't know, 5 pitchers in the league in Sandy Alcantara. Top 5 seem reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
You have a batting champion in Luis Arraez. Indisputable. 321 average last year. Great addition to the team in a vacuum if you don't look at necessarily what they gave up, because I'm still confused by that. But it does seem like the rest of it is putting a ton of pressure on Kim Ng and Skip Schumacher in his first year as manager. Because I think that's something that people are forgetting, is they have a new manager in Skip Schumacher this year. He's been the bench coach of the Padres, bench coach of the Cardinals. This is his first crack as an everyday manager. Technically, he managed for like a week after Oli Marmol got ejected and suspended for a week, but or sick or something. I can't remember. But that's a lot of pressure to put on a whole bunch of people who you've really not given all that much leash to go out and actually try and win you a division. Because the Marlins have not really put much money into this team in the last couple of years. Basically, since they were sold and they did the fire sale with under Jeter and everything, they've really not put money back into the team. You lose one of your big starters in Pablo Lopez. You lose one of your veteran leaders in Brian Anderson. Okay, so now we're trying to fill some holes. We're hoping to see Soler and Avisail Garcia come back to form, but it's not a given. So I guess if I were that reporter that Bruce Sherman just said that quote to, I would want him to go more in depth than we have a Cy Young winner and we have a batting champion, because 2 players do not make a playoff roster.
Very true. They had a Cy Young winner last year. They didn't even sniff the playoff race.
They didn't have a batting champion though.
But the Twins had a batting champion and they didn't make the playoffs either.
That's a valid point.
So yeah, but you're right about like looking to bounce backs for making this team like in the race at least. And I think expecting some bounce back is very reasonable, because they were downright like very unlucky with the injuries to their offense, and just all the players just didn't seem like they performed that well. It wouldn't be surprising to see like Avisail Garcia and Jorge Soler perform more like their career normals.
Yeah.
And that just boosts the offense up. Like those 2 guys, if they play how they normally play, like they're going to be a lot better.
Yeah, in a full season of Jazz, because Jazz was hurt for a while last year.
That's huge.
So that's huge. So this team should be better than last year. I have no qualm saying that. But we're talking a 70-win team last year. We're talking a division that had 3 teams over 87 wins. The playoffs is a major uphill battle, because you're not winning the division. I can guarantee you that. So now you're looking at the wild card. Well, who do you have to compete with in the wild card? You have the Brewers, you have the Cubs, you have the Giants, and you have the Diamondbacks. And I think it's pretty safe to say that those are the 4 teams that are kind of the next ones in when you're looking at last year's playoff race. And I think this year's playoff race and last year's are pretty similar, because all the teams that were good got better. All the teams that were worse didn't really get a whole lot better. So those 4 teams, where do the Marlins stack up in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm just so conflicted on that. I feel like they are better than the Nationals, the Reds, the Pirates, and the Rockies, but I don't know where they fit in with those other teams that you mentioned, like the Cubs, Diamondbacks, Giants, and Brewers. I think they're like somewhere between those 2 tiers, but I could see them going either way. And it kind of depends on how the offense plays this year, because the pitching is going to at least like give them some floor. They've got really good starting pitching. They're returning all their starters except for Lopez. They've got other pitchers that are like pretty close to making the majors, and like Yuri Perez, um, Sixto Sanchez if he ever comes back from his injury.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got like plenty of starting pitching depth and like high end pitchers in Sandy, Jesus Luzardo, Edward Cabrera. Um, I have no doubt that the starting rotation is going to do their part for this team. I just keep going back to the offense and seeing Joey Wendell and John Birdie sharing shortstop, and Garrett Cooper and really unproven guys like Brian De La Cruz and Jesus Sanchez who could break out, but right now we can't have any expectation that they're going to be like anything close to average or better than average or anything like that.
Yeah. So I think we both seem kind of down on the Marlins with how we've been discussing it, but it's because we're talking about the question of are they in playoff contention. Let's just for a second, just throw that question out the window. Looking at this year's Marlins compared to last year's Marlins, I have a pretty good feeling. I think this is an improved team. I think that they can go out and show that they are on the right path. Granted, they've been trying to find that path for multiple years, and so far have not been able to find it. But they have made some moves that fill some holes. They've made some other moves that temporarily create holes in trading Pablo Lopez, because you're expecting someone to come back from injury, take that fifth roster or rotation spot. You've got some of your other big pitching prospects that are already out for the season. So yeah, but the pitching is going to be fine. But they're going out and trying to address some of these outfield hole or these lineup holes with proven vets who maybe are on the late side of their careers here, and in Gene Segura, and some of the Joey Wendell, probably not in the back half of his career. I don't know. He's weird. He's still kind of young.
He's not young. He's like 33 this year.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he's probably in the back half. So you're going out and looking at some of these kind of...
This team's not young. That's the thing, especially on offense. They've got plenty of veteran players. They don't really have a whole bunch of young guys that are like waiting in the wings to take over, unless Brian De La Cruz, who he himself is not that young. He's 26. Jesus Sanchez is 25. Like they're one of the only guys who is, under 30 other than Jazz.
Yeah.
And Arias. So
yeah, so it's really weird because it's like I do expect them to be better. I definitely see some major flaws in this team still. I don't know that I hate them. Like, I don't hate their chances, but I don't love their chances. So Bruce Sherman coming out and saying, my expectation is playoffs. It's like, hold up, bud. Take a step back. Let's maybe give the GM just a little bit of coin to go out and spend maybe next year. And whenever all of your other pieces are back and healthy, hopefully you've seen some breakouts from guys like Jazz Chisholm over the course of a full season. We know what he can do on the field, but he's not been a full season yet because of some injuries. Hopefully Brian De La Cruz can break out. Hopefully Jesus Sanchez can break out. Hopefully
but
Luis
it's a lot of hope.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hoping at this point.
Yes, this year is hoping. Let's get through the hope year. And then when things work out for some players, let's build around those players.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that, but I am not buying it. I do not think this team's going to be in playoff contention by midseason.
I don't think they'll be in playoff contention. I think they could be in playoff contention the next year.
Yeah. We were excited about their moves going into 2022, and that's what like bothers me, because I don't feel like they're better than a year ago, really.
Yeah, they're better if.
Better if.
That's
it. Some injuries.
They're better if.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part, is like, as a fan, you want to see your team go out and get better, not get better if. That's kind of the reason that like Cardinals fans are upset that there's no moves that were made in the rotation. Is like, we're expecting a lot of ifs and hopes and dreams, and World Series are built on hopes and dreams. That's true. But they're also built on talent and like sure things and people being healthy. And so there's a lot of other stuff in that equation. You can't just be on hopes and dreams. So.
Okay, so now here's where things get very interesting with the three remaining teams we haven't talked about. We're going to start off with the Phillies, who finished in third place last year with 87 wins. They made the World Series. The hype was so awesome in Philly to see them go on that World Series run. Seems like that same old Phillies vibe has been lifted, and there's so much optimism for the Phillies season going into this year. They also made a ton of huge moves this year, bringing in Trey Turner, one of the biggest moves of the entire offseason. They also bolstered the rotation with Taijuan Walker, and then their bullpen, which has been a constant, topic of conversation about how bad it is. Brought in Craig Kimbrell, Gregory Soto, Matt Strom. Now that unit is looking strong. They are missing Bryce Harper probably for the first half of the season with his UCL surgery. Noah Syndergaard is gone. Kyle Gibson is gone. Gene Segura is gone. Zach Eflin is gone. So some of these middle of the rotation guys are gone.
Yeah, and then they traded away some of their younger pieces like Nick Maton and Matt Vierling in order to go get Gregory Soto, which, I mean, I'm a huge Nick Maton fan. He's from my hometown, so I'm going to be a little biased here. I do think those are really good young players. I think they're going to make some noise in the majors for the Tigers. But if you can go out and get Gregory Soto and add that to bolster your bullpen to give up those two, and I think maybe there was one other guy, I just don't remember who it was. It's not a bad move.
Yeah,
I probably would have done it too.
All in. It's Dave Dombrowski we're talking about. They're not trying out players. They've got their team pretty much set from last year with the big additions that they made, and they're going to be trying to win every game and make additional moves at the trade deadline to improve this squad and go deep in the postseason again. So the question is, are the 2023 Phillies the World Series favorites? That's a big question.
It is a big question because, I mean, we've obviously not touched on 4 of the divisions yet, but you cannot count out the Astros. I mean, they're literally coming off a World Series, and you cannot count out the Dodgers. You cannot count out the Padres now. And the American League East, pretty much all of them, you can't really count out. So, there's a lot of teams that have a lot of hopes for the World Series. But this is a Phillies team built mostly of veterans that have played in big moments. Trey Turner has won a World Series. Kyle Schwarber has won a World Series. JT Realmuto has not won a World Series, but he's seen a lot of baseball. And the dude is, and you're going to hate me for saying this, dude's clutch. I like JT Realmuto. I like him in big moments. Nick Castellanos, if he can rebound from his kind of down season last year, he's a guy full of big moments. You've got Bryce, who still has not won a World Series, right? Because he was gone the year before the Nats won. Then he came here. But Bryce is a multi-time MVP, a rookie of the year. He's built for big moments. This is a team that, when you look at it on paper, if you didn't know who the GM was, you could probably guess 1 to 2 guys, and you're probably right. And it's Dave Dombrowski, probably your first guess. But then you've got some of these younger guys in Bryson Stott, who I think is primed for a huge breakout this year, honestly. Alec Boehm had a phenomenal rookie season. Maybe not phenomenal. A step down from phenomenal rookie season, a horrible sophomore year. And then last year, he kind of bounced back a bit to be somewhere in the middle. And if he can stay somewhere in the middle, this team is just fine with Alec Boehm playing third base. If there's another if for this team, though, if he continues practicing how to field the ball,
which he let's give him a little credit. He made tons of improvement over the course of the season. Like, he was not good to start, but it seems like he got a lot better. And
yes, but I'm hoping that he wasn't just resting on his laurels all off season and he was putting in some work on fielding, because it's not like riding a bike. No. So,
and I just want to go back to your point. You've been talking about a lot of these guys in the lineup. Like, I love the Phillies lineup. This team, when they get Bryce back, first off, I think they're going to be okay without Bryce for a little bit.
Yeah.
They'll survive it. But when they have a fully healthy lineup and Alec Boehm and Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh are your like bottom of the lineup, those guys don't necessarily need to carry the weight of the ball club here, because the top of the lineup is just insanely good. I think this is the best offense in the National League right now on paper.
Yeah. I do have one question about Brandon Marsh here. Knowing that he doesn't have to be one of the three guys behind Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, does that kind of relief, that lift of the pressure off his shoulders, does that prime him for a breakout at 25 years old?
Yeah, I think the Phillies truly believe in him, because we mentioned the Matt Vierling trade where they sent out Matt Vierling. It seemed like prior to that trade, it was going to be sort of a platoon between Marsh and Vierling. They send out Vierling. Now you have one true center fielder in Brandon Marsh. They're saying, hey, you run with this job. You're playing against lefties. You're going to play every single day, and we believe in you.
And when they traded for him, they traded their other center fielder in Mickey Moniak. So, absolutely, even from day one, before he joined the team, like, they were showing faith in him. And I mean, I think he's one of the first like big baseball cards that you bought, right? Like, as a prospect, like, you found one of his autos and you were really hyped about him as a prospect. And
definitely, yeah.
Like, this is a guy, he's got the prospect pedigree. He's struggled a little bit, but he's only 25. He's now on a team that he doesn't have to be the performer. Like, I think that goes a long way with some of these young guys. Let them break out on their time. Don't force them into a situation where it's them carrying the team. And so I think Brandon Marsh is primed for a big year this year. I'm excited to see it.
There is one area that Brandon Marsh needs to carry the team, and that's actually playing the outfield. He's going to be covering a lot of ground. We cannot forget that he's going to be flanked by Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos for probably this entire season, because Bryce, when he comes back, I assume is going to be limited to DH, at least to start off. So they're going to be playing those guys in the outfield a ton again.
Luckily, defense is the one area where Marsh really hasn't ever struggled.
Yeah, so he's excellent out there. So it's a good thing.
So,
okay, yeah. We haven't talked about their pitching at all yet. And there's one really interesting guy I think that lots of people are talking about right now, and that's Andrew Painter, 19-year-old sensation. Worked his way through the minors last year. He was a 2021 draft pick, first rounder. He's just rocketed his way through the minors, and the Phillies are saying this guy can make the team if he has a good spring. It's like a legit situation where they're not going to hold him back. They're going to let him perform. And if he's ready, since this team has the World Series aspirations, they're not like going to mess around with the service time or anything like that. What do you think about this situation with Painter? We haven't seen a 19-year-old starting pitcher, and I don't know the last time we've seen one.
So, well, Julio Urias was the last one.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. This situation, now the age is a little bit different, but the situation kind of reminds me of a guy who's actually also in this division. Back in 2006, Dave Dombrowski brought up the young stud, Justin Verlander, as a rookie, and he went off, ended up taking the team to the World Series. Like, this feels like Dombrowski is trusting Painter the same way he trusted Verlander back in 2006. If he makes this team. Like, it's a very Dombrowski move to bring up a 19-year-old to face guys like Mike Trout, guys like Ronald Acuna Jr., guys like Juan Soto. That's a lot of pressure to put on that guy, but he is really good. So, I mean, hey, let's do it. Let's try it out. Let's see what happens. I'm excited. So,
yeah, I'm very excited to see what he can do. And anything else on like for the Phillies or anything?
So, my answer to the question that we posed: are they World Series favorites? Once they get to the postseason, this team is definitely built to just keep winning. They showed it last year. They managed to win a lot more than I thought they would going into that. Made it to Game 6 of the World Series. Seeing pretty big contributions from a bullpen that we were very, very down on. A rotation that we really only had hopes for two of the guys in Nola and Wheeler, and then after that, we weren't really sure. Ranger Suarez stepped up. Now they bring in Tawan Walker. Bailey Falter is slotted in as their fifth, and Bailey Falter could be pretty darn good too. We could potentially see Andrew Painter. They went out, they bolstered their lineup. Their bullpen now has Kimbrel and Gregory Soto on top of the guys who ended up kind of finding it at the end of last year. This is a significantly better team than the team that just went to the World Series, which is kind of nice to say and weird to say, because that's not typically the case. Usually if you win the World Series, there's not really a ton of getting better to do. They did it. I would say they're probably one of the World Series favorites this year. This team is stacked.
Yeah, I'm not going to go so far to say that they're a World Series favorite when I'm not even sure I can pick them to be number one in their own division. So
I did say one of. I didn't specify they're the, because to be honest, that's a pretty.
Was, are they the World Series favorite?
Okay, well then no.
I'm gonna go with no.
But they're up there. They're top 5, I think. And I think two out of the other 4 are also in their division. So like, it's a little difficult.
So I guess I thought that the Zips win total projection was kind of interesting, that it was down at 85 wins. That doesn't sound like a World Series favorite or anything. And what is the risk with this Phillies team? I think it's their defense, and then those back half of the lineup. I did say like the top half can carry the team, but if none of those young players in Marsh, Bohm, and Stott, if none of those guys like actually improve, if any of them or all of them get worse, then you maybe start seeing some of the issues with this club.
Yeah, it kind of feels like to me the issue is maybe depth. Because those top 6 guys in the lineup, amazing. If one of them goes down, God forbid, your replacement is Josh Harrison, Edmundo Sosa, or Dalton Guthrie, or Garrett Stubbs if it's JT. Like, probably not a terrible bench, but not necessarily guys that you would want to put in there long term if you had to. Edmundo Sosa could still be very good. I don't know much about Dalton Guthrie. Josh Harrison is kind of on the late side of his career. And then I think their kind of pitching depth is probably the other thing that is going against them, because if they lose Nola or Wheeler, well, now the replacement, assuming that Painter already made the squad, who's your replacement?
Yeah.
In their bullpen,
that's very fair.
We could very easily go back to last year's regular season bullpen. Not exactly thrilling. So I think that's probably the big question with the Phillies is their depth enough? Do they need it? Like, they very well might not need that depth, because if the starting 9 all stay on the field, yeah, you're just fine. But
okay, yeah, that's the Phillies. Let's go to the Mets here. Mets, they won 101 games last year. and they, like the Phillies, went out and spent a bunch of money. They've spent even more money than the Phillies. Steve Cohen has zero care for payrolls or luxury tax or anything like that. He brought in Justin Verlander, Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, Omar Narvaez, Tommy Pham, smaller deals like David Robertson, Brooks Raley. They also re-signed some of their free agents, including like an 8-year deal for Brandon Nimmo, Edwin Diaz on a monster contract for a reliever, and Adam Ottavino. They also lost. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and they extended guys like Jeff McNeil, and I think there was one other extension, right?
Not remembering right now, but probably.
Yeah.
Jacob deGrom is now a Ranger. Chris Bassett is a Blue Jay. Taijuan Walker is a Philly. So a lot of turnover in that starting rotation. And there's no team, I think, that has higher expectations and hopes than this Mets club. So the question that I have, I think it's a very legitimate question. Are the 2023 Mets better than the 2022 Mets?
That is a tough question because, one, it's hard to get better than 101 wins. I don't think regular season wins is maybe the metric we need to be looking at. But if you're using that as your metric, it's a lot. It's hard to get better than that. The rotation, you're replacing DeGrom with Verlander. That's the closest thing that you can get to a replacement for Jacob deGrom. A guy who's on the field more, maybe not quite as dominant as deGrom, but still one of the top 5 pitchers on the planet. So, pretty good trade, if you're asking me. Obviously, you still want healthy deGrom, but I will gladly take Justin Verlander. You bring in Kodai Senga from Japan, who he's a starter, right? Or is he an outfielder?
He's a starter.
Okay, yeah. So he's going to come in. We don't really know how his stuff is going to translate to the U.S. I don't think anyone's terribly concerned about him. So I would say that's probably a decent replacement for Chris Bassett without actually seeing him play. Because Chris Bassett was really good last year, but he wasn't on the same level as deGrom, as Tyler Megill was at the very beginning of the year. And then now you just get to your 5th rotation spot, right? So Taijuan Walker. Who would you rather have, Taijuan Walker or Jose Quintana? I think probably Taijuan Walker, right?
I think probably, yeah.
But I wouldn't say that it's a terrible or like a terribly huge downgrade there. Like, I think you're more confident in Taijuan Walker to repeat what he did last year than Jose Quintana. But I think generally it's not a huge downgrade. So the rotation, kind of a wash, if you ask me. So then you're looking at, did they get better in the bullpen or in the lineup / bench? You bring in Omar Narvaez to catch. And I would argue that he is much better than James McCann. So now you're probably going to have Omar Narvaez and Tomas Nido until Francisco Alvarez makes the team. Tommy Pham, I don't really understand that one, but their bullpen, they made some huge changes. Brooks Raley, David Robertson, bringing back the reliever in Edwin Diaz and bringing in Adam Ottavino, like, that's a substantial bolster to your bullpen. So I would say that, yes, they did get better. It's hard to get better. They did it through their bullpen because that's kind of where they still had some questions.
Yeah. The one thing that I keep thinking about with the Mets is last year, I think people see how their season ended. They got swept out of the first round. They say, oh, the Mets like squandered their division lead. They ended up finishing in a tie, but technically they were second in the division. And then they didn't have a good postseason run, so the season was a failure. But 101 wins, as you said, that's not easy to replicate. And the whole lineup, like the Mets had like pretty much a dream season all the way through the regular season. Everything went according to plan. All their lineup members stayed healthy for the most part, other than Starling Marte for a short bit, Escobar for a little bit. But all their players had pretty amazing seasons. I'm not sure that they're going to keep up that kind of health, and whether all their players can repeat what they did last year, especially guys like Brandon Nimmo, who, he's a really good player. He's just never stayed healthy like he did last year, and I
that's
don't
true.
see him doing it again and having such an amazing season again.
So
same thing with. Go ahead.
Is your gut telling you that this is kind of a 21-22 San Francisco Giants situation?
Not to that extent, because that was like several players that completely played above their expected levels for that one season. And then they just all fell back down to earth or below even the expectation for the next season. This team's really good. I'm just trying to say that I don't know if they really got that much better, especially in the lineup, because I see a lot of players doing worse than last year. And when you look at the bottom of this lineup, it's Daniel Vogelback, DH, Mark Canha, Eduardo Escobar, Omar Narvaez. That's the bottom four in the Mets lineup.
Okay.
Is that really exciting?
Not necessarily, but let me counter that with this. Brett Beatty, coming back from injury, mega prospect, cracks the majors last year. I think he got injured after 2 games or something, so like he didn't really get a shot. Francisco Alvarez to replace Omar Narvaez if he doesn't do well. Like, these are 2 guys who, I think Francisco Alvarez is like the number 2 prospect in baseball. These are 2 guys who could come in and make an impact if guys like Eduardo Escobar or Omar Narvaez or Mike Canha falter. Mark Canha, not Mike. You know what I mean? So like they do have prospects that are ready to come up and take their shot, which one would make this team younger, because this is not a young team.
Nope.
So I would like to see these guys come up sooner than later, and those are probably the guys who are most likely to lose their jobs, lose their starting jobs. But which, if they become your bench guys,
the way this team operates, though, I'm not seeing how Beatty or Alvarez become everyday starters. Like I could see it happening, but I think they're gonna try to rely on their veteran players. Like that just seems like the Mets move right now. That seems like what Buck Showalter wants to do.
Yeah, that's true. And
they pretty much said that Alvarez is not going to break with the team until he is ready to catch every day. And they're not going to make him a DH. They're not going to make him a bench player. So he's going to start the year in the minors.
Yeah, so I think that's probably more on Tomas Nido and Omar Narvaez, which I love Tomas Nido. I think he's one of like the most fun, like no-name guys who's really just kind of, he's not amazing, but he's not bad. Like he's one of those guys. He's just kind of a major league mainstay, and he's maybe one of the longest tenured Mets right now. But he's not the most thrilling catcher. And Omar Narvaez is better than James McCann, but I don't think it would take all that much for Francisco Alvarez to outpace them. At which point you're probably going to cut ties with Nido, trade him somewhere, because I mean he's still young. He's still got 2 years of control. There's some teams who could use him. Well, then maybe you move Narvaez. I don't know.
Yeah,
like
could be.
But it feels like it shouldn't be that difficult for Francisco Alvarez to take that job. Like his bat is awesome. That's kind of what's carried him as a prospect, is his bat, but he's not a bad catcher either.
I think that's the thing that's actually holding him back, that they don't want to risk it with the young catcher with the staff.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, they should trade him then, because that kid needs to be in the majors. So,
yeah. And you mentioned this team's not exactly young. Speaking of which, their starting rotation is very old. We got 40-year-old Justin Verlander, 39-year-old Max Scherzer, 35-year-old Carlos Carrasco, 34-year-old Jose Quintana. The young guy is 30-year-old Senga.
who we've
So,
not seen in the U.S.
who we've never
yet.
seen. So there's another reason why things could go very bad if they do what old pitchers do and get hurt.
That's very true. Yeah, I don't know.
So I'm pouring cold water all over the Mets. I still think they're a really good team, and they're going to have a really great season. I think. I just don't think they're. I can definitively say that they're better than last year.
I mean, I don't think there's any definitively saying it anyway. Like, even if we didn't have those concerns, like that team was so good last year that you can't just definitively say, yes, this team is better. It's kind of a gut feel thing. And gut feel to me says they're going to be fine. Yeah, you're probably going to have injuries to guys like, well, I don't want to say injuries to. You have questions on the longevity of Brandon Nimmo over the course of a full season. You have questions on like Carlos Carrasco, for example, who does have a substantial injury history, along with some other long-term illnesses, because I think he's got leukemia, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, there's definitely questions there. Everything went right for him last year. That's not a given this year. But I think on paper, this team did get slightly better. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming at. Like, if things continue to go at least 85%, well, this team's going to be fine. They're going to win 90 games. No questions asked. So.
Yep. All right. So we got one more team, and that's the Braves, who maybe have less hype than the Phillies and the Mets, but they quietly made some little improvements to their club as well. They brought in Sean Murphy. That was huge.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best catchers in the league. They also added to the bullpen with Joe Jimenez. They did have a really big loss in Dansby Swanson, who's one of their leaders. Amazing defensive shortstop, pretty good hitter too. They traded away William Contreras in that Murphy deal, and Kenley Jansen is no longer a Brave. So the question I have on the Braves is, are they the favorite in this division? They have won 5 straight NL East titles, but have the other teams caught up to them? Are they going to overtake the Braves, or have the Braves done enough to keep that top spot?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question by first asking you a different question. You and I both really like the Braves, right? Kind of historically, like, they frustrate me because they have for years been kind of the rival with the Cardinals, kind of getting into the postseason, especially 2012, whatever. But you and I both like the Braves, right?
Yeah.
We both hate the Dodgers.
I feel like my hatred of the Dodgers has like faded away now.
Okay, but like historically, we both hate the Dodgers?
Sure.
Okay, so you're probably not going to like this comp. I think this Braves team is the new Dodgers from the standpoint of they're consistently the best in their division. They are always seeming to find more young guys to come up and replace. They are always, you can't count them out ever. Like, they're always the team that you're like, yeah, they're the favorite. This is 90s Braves all over again. And they got a championship this time. So I think, short answer, yes, they are still the favorite. This is a team that does not go out and make big flashy moves because they don't have to. Like, they have Ronald Acuna Jr. They did go out and get Sean Murphy. They've got young pitchers like Spencer Strider, Max Fried, the Mike Soroka, if he comes back and can pitch similar to how he was before, I think it might take some time to get back to that point, but like it's still there. Then you've got the young guys that came up last year that they've already extended. So they're showing a lot of faith in guys like Michael Harris, like Vaughn Grissom. Like, and then you've got Travis d'Arnaud, who is quietly probably one of the better catcher DH combos in the league. Like, the dude can hit really well. So this is a team that is just kind of built to just consistently win, whether they're flashy or not. And if you watch them on the field, they are kind of flashy. Like, this is a fun team with Ronald, Michael Harris, Vaughn Grissom, Ozzie Albies, who we've kind of just completely glossed over so far. He should be back and healthy this year, I think. Now you've got Sean Murphy.
The name of Austin Riley yet?
I have not mentioned Austin Riley, who is probably going to be an MVP candidate again. And rightfully so. The dude is really freaking good. Matt Olson over at first base. Like, every time I say another name about this team, it kind of makes me smile a little more thinking about just how good this lineup is. And I don't think people give it enough respect, because this is a really, really good team.
Yeah. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try to poke some holes in the lineup here.
Do it.
I think the Dansby Swanson loss is probably not being talked about enough. Or at least I haven't heard that much chatter about it, because Guy is one of the best, if not the best, defensive shortstops. And they're going to turn over the keys to young Vaughn Grissom, who, you know, he's been working with Ron Washington, which is always a good thing. But as a prospect, evaluators thought that Vaughn Grissom was not going to be able to stick as a shortstop. He did play that in the minor leagues, but he's like 6'3", maybe hasn't, shown all the traits of like a awesome shortstop. So that's like a huge question mark that they have on their defense after having Dansby there for years, providing amazing defense year in, year out, even when he wasn't an elite hitter. And then left field, that's another like big question mark with this lineup. Who is playing left field? They've got Marcelo Ozuna. They've got Eddie Rosario. They brought in guys like Sam Hilliard, Jordan Luplow. I mean, that's like a little dicey right there.
True. That is very true. But you're talking about two positions. I think when we were talking about the Mets a minute ago, we were talking about three positions. When we were talking about the Phillies, we were talking about three positions. We were talking about the Marlins and the Nats, it was way more than three. Yes, they have holes. I think this is the most consistent team and the team that we could probably best project what they're going to do. Yes, they have a lot of young guys who could very well just flop. And Michael Harris and Vaughn Grissom and some of these guys who came up really hot as rookies, they've got to show that they can repeat it. I think a lot of people think that they can and will. There's a chance that they don't. Like, there is questions there. I still think that this is probably the most consistent team and the team that I am most confident in saying, yes, they are what the projection says. And you're right. The Dansby loss is not being talked about enough. He's coming off his absolute best season as a major leaguer at the age of 28, right in the middle of his prime. 6.4 WAR, 277, 329, 447 slash. 25 home runs. He did have one of the highest strikeout rates of his career, but the rest of the production that he put up kind of lets that slide, because he, for the first 3 years of his career, was a pretty bad hitter. He was there for defense. Now he's showing that he was worthy of being a number one pick, right? Yeah, the number one overall pick by the Arizona Diamondbacks back in 2015. He showed that he was worthy of that. So that is a huge loss. Luckily for them, he's not going in the division. He went over to the Cubs. But those are big shoes to fill. I still think that this team is the team to beat. Like, I think even with the flaws, even with the flaws, the questions, it feels like they have the most sure thing. I think their floor is probably the highest. Their ceiling is probably not the highest, but it's close.
But it's pretty high.
It's pretty high.
This team,
like
they won 101 games last year, and it almost felt like they were sort of just sleepwalking their way through the first half of the season. Then they obviously like really turned it on. I think one guy that we've barely talked about here is Ronald Acuna. He came back from the ACL injury, and he had a decent season, but it wasn't the Ronald Acuna that we've seen in the past. I think a year removed from that injury, he's going to be back to the absolute stud top 5 player in the league that he's shown that he can be, like right before the injury. So
yeah,
that's going to be awesome for this team.
And then if Albies can come back and just be himself, this team will be just fine.
Yeah, they're going to be awesome. And watch out for Spencer Strider to just continue taking the league by storm and dominating.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I think until proven otherwise, the Braves should be the favorite in this division. And that's where we are with the NL East. So, you have any general thoughts on this division? Who's gonna win it, if not the Braves?
I think in the regular season, if it's not the Braves, I'm still taking the Mets. Now, once it gets to the postseason,
we can't project the postseason. We can't even try to.
Once it gets to the postseason, though, literally any 3 of these teams could very well go and win the World Series. Like in the Mets, Braves, and Phillies. But I just think that there's enough questions with the Phillies that not everything's going to work out exactly perfectly. They're probably going to slump, and that's a team that if it slumps, it's going to slump hard. I in my opinion, just because it's a bunch of sluggers. A bunch of sluggers. If they slump for a couple weeks, they're not going to be driving in a whole lot of runs. So, but they'll be just fine. They will make the playoffs. All 3 of these teams, I think, will. I don't really have any doubts in my mind about that. So, yeah, this is going to be a fun division.
Yes, it is. I'm very excited to watch some NL East baseball after having this chat here. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll be back next week with another division. Talk to you then.
If you enjoy this episode, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube so that you never miss a future episode. On YouTube, you got to hit that subscribe button and that little notification bell to get notifications. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod.